Harper Audio presents Viscount Breckenridge to the Rescue by Stephanie Lawrence, performed by Matthew Brenher. Prologue, February 1829. The castle was silent and still. Outside, snow lay heavy on the land, a white blanket smothering hill and vale, loch and forest. He sat in the armory, one of his retreats. Head bent, he concentrated on cleaning the guns used earlier that day, when a break in the weather had allowed him and a small group of others to venture forth. They'd bagged enough fresh meat to keep the castle supplied for a week, maybe more. He'd taken some small satisfaction in that. Meat, at least, he could provide. The sound of determined footsteps reached him. All satisfaction fled. What replaced it? He couldn't put a name to the roiling mix of fury, frustration, and dread. His mother stalked into the room. He didn't lift his head. She came to a halt at the end of the central table at which he sat. He felt her glare, but stoically continued to reassemble the gun he'd been cleaning. She broke first. Slapping a hand on the table, she leaned forward to hiss, "Swear it! Swear that you'll do it, that you'll go south, seize one of the Cynster sisters, and bring her here so I can have my revenge." He took his time reacting. Clung to the slowness he habitually used to cloak his true nature, and so better control others. However, in this instance, his mother had schemed well enough to put herself beyond his control, indeed to the extent that he now found himself in hers. That stung. The what-ifs still resounded in his head. If he'd paid more attention to her ramblings, might he have noticed some sign of her scheme earlier? Early enough to step in and put a stop to it? Yet she'd been thus for as long as he'd been old enough to notice, filled with black thoughts, with burning vengeance at her core. His father had never seen her clearly. To him she'd always put on a sweet face, a mask impenetrable enough to cloak the bitterness beneath. For his part, he'd hoped his father's death would drain the black bile from her heart. Instead, the poison had welled even more corrosively. He'd grown too accustomed to hearing her ravings. He'd stopped listening long ago. Too, it seemed, his and others' cost now. But it was too late for regrets, much less recriminations. Raising his head enough to meet her eyes, letting nothing he felt show in his face, he held her gaze for a moment, then briefly nodded. "Aye, I'll do it." He forced himself to say the words she wanted to hear. "I'll bring one of the Cynster sisters here, so you can have your revenge." Chapter 1. March 1829. Wadham Gardens, London. Heather Cynster knew her latest plan to find a suitable husband was doomed, the instant she set foot in Lady Harford's salon. In a distant corner, a dark head, perfectly coiffed in the latest rakish style, rose. A pair of sharp hazel eyes pinned her where she stood. Damn! Keeping a smile firmly fixed over her involuntarily clenching teeth, as if she hadn't noticed the most startlingly handsome man in the room staring so intently at her, she let her gaze drift on. Breckenridge was hemmed in by not one, but 3 dashing ladies, all patently vying for his attention. She sincerely wished them every success, and prayed he take the sensible course, and pretend he hadn't seen her. She was certainly going to pretend that she hadn't seen him. Refocusing on the surprisingly large crowd Lady Harford had enticed to her soiree, Heather determinedly banished Breckenridge from her mind, and considered her prospects. Most of the guests were older than she, all the ladies at least. Some she recognized, others she did not, but it would be surprising if any other lady present wasn't married, or widowed, or more definitively on the shelf than Heather. Soirees of the style of Lady Harford's were primarily the province of the well-bred but bored matrons, those in search of more convivial
Sample complete. Ready to continue?